Thank you. I'm John Steele from Adept. This is a question for Fred. Well, an observation and a question. I really liked your differentiation between architect and engineer. The different ways of thinking, absolutely fundamental. We're all looking at the same thing, but seeing something different in our minds. Brian Lawson did some great work on how designers think, so it would link into the stuff you've done. It's old, it's like 25 plus years old, but really good stuff. So I thought that was great. The question was really about modularity. So you talked there about modular systems, the product, the potential for there to be, I think it's modern methods of construction linked. You talked about the product of design being modular. What about the process of design? Because there's huge advantage to have consistency and repeatability in the process to get to the end product, as well as having a module that emerges as a physical asset.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Is it working?
Yeah, it works.
Okay. Do I need to? Hello? Okay, better now. As Mr. Murphy say, technology always fails when we need it the most, right? Absolutely, and against all my best judgment from all my colleagues, I do believe that there is a room for modularity in design. But don't say I said that, because I'm going to buy a lot of enemies with my colleagues architects. We tend to believe that everything is original and needs to be unique. But I don't think that we always need to reinvent the wheel. There is a lot of merit in looking at what we have done in the past and learn from it. That said, I don't think it should work as a constraint. Like the design process, I see it as a very iterative process. You go back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. So in that sense, there is a modularity of the process itself. Doesn't necessarily mean that the elements of the design needs to be modular. And one of the interesting things that, as I was developing some research also to fundament some of the ideas that I was presenting, with the work of the University of Stuttgart, was that in today's world, when you look at the computer, at the robot and on an assembly line for auto industry, right? You look at it, and in reality, it can generate a lot of different functions, right? And the same thing you can do it with AI. When you work collaborative with AI, your design process actually becomes very iterative, but also very iterative, but also very free. And I do believe that if we embrace AI and human to machine collaboration, you can overcome all of these issues, because it's about finding the best performance design without almost any barriers, focus only on the performance itself.
I want to jump in on something you said there. Modularity doesn't have to always be the same thing. Literally, almost 20 years ago now, one of my first jobs in BIM was for a single-family home builder. All of their work was custom. Every single house is different. I mean, they had stock plans, stock things that you could choose from in terms of style and whatnot, but every house was a whole new set of drawings. And it all came down to building the right modules that could be plugged in and stretched and skewed, and by dropping those pieces in, we were able to take their design process and cut out about 70% of their drafting and design time. Like, I literally worked myself out of a job because I got them so efficient in modular design that was purely custom. So modular doesn't have to mean only a container that gets stacked up or only prefabricated walls. Because of all the computer automation, because of AIs being able to filter cut lists for us and pre-game and cut lists of materials across multiple projects even, and track what's available in waste, that modularity doesn't have to be the same thing over and over again. It can be very, very different and still use the efficiencies of this is a thing that can come in an infinite number of sizes.
Can I supplement one thing? Actually, Michael, I think it's a very good point, because we always tend to think as modularity and creativity as two opposites of like fighting each other. And in another life, when I was very, very young and didn't have this many white air, I was some time involved in some music composition, or no, music performance. I was not a composer. And it's amazing when you look at the array of creativity and different compositions that you can get from music. And if you look at classical music, everything can be represented with 6 lines and a couple of dots. That's super modular and regimented, but it still allows you a full range of creativity that we have with music.
Excellent example, I would say, definitely. Anyone else has any questions?
Hi there. Thank you guys for bringing your experience here. That was a brilliant talk. This is a question for Martin. We're a relatively small company for BIM, and it was just sort of what sort of numbers does it take for the sort of learning methods you discussed to become practical? What sort of team numbers and team sizes are you working with?
Yes, so I've worked in a variety of size firms. I started off in a little 10-person firm up in kind of Lancashire in Northern England, where I'm from. I've worked for IDAS, which at the time was the top 5 in terms of size in the world. KPF's, what I feel is a sort of like nice medium-sized firm. You sort of know most people, but it's not. We can work on some cool schemes because of the size of things. And it's just about tailoring it to what you work with. So because we've got a reasonable amount of people, we can do quite a few different things. We can target different audiences. When I worked in smaller practice, it was about doing one thing a week. It was about putting that lunch on, so it kind of pulled everyone in. And it was about kind of talking about the most relevant topics, kind of what's the most interest. And at that level, in that small firm is probably where I did most of my learning, from kind of working directly with the people around me. That's a lot easier in a small firm. Obviously, kind of things like putting on Tech Week, you probably need a slightly larger critical mass of that, but there's no reason you couldn't do a smaller version. You might not be able to kind of bring in as many sort of like external speakers, but if you've got different specialists in the office, people that focus on different things, whether you've got 10, 20, 100 people, you can still do that one takeover day. You can have, the Revit expert speaks in the morning, the legal expert speaks. You can still use that kind of opportunity. It's, like I said, I think the only factor is how often you do it and how many types of opportunities you can provide. We have a different kind of learning session most days of the week. If you're in a smallish office, people will probably just say, like, calm down a bit, we'll get round to it. But it's just kind of working out that frequency and what works best.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry to make you move. So Michael, the question is for you, and forgive if you mentioned this. What challenges did you have with essentially trying to get buy-in either from your firm or others with some of these like newer fringe technologies, if you did? And if so, how did you overcome those?
Some of them we haven't really overcome. We had, to be honest, we have a number of users who don't want to use the HoloLens because it's scary. I had a user who was just frankly intimidated by it. They couldn't figure it out. But I had another user who is less technically savvy. They routinely have problems with Outlook and just using it in general. And they took to it like a fish to water. I think I mentioned very briefly that we had someone in senior leadership being like, oh, quarter-inch accuracy, 6 millimeters, is not accurate enough for field verification. It totally is. But they had in their head a particular thing, and wanted to stay stuck in that route. And talking through folks with the what's changing and what they're actually doing is what the task is and how you accomplish it. People get stuck with the I want my drawings to look this way. And it's not that the drawing needs to look that way to communicate the important idea. The whole point of having a particular drawing, a particular schedule, is to communicate the important pieces of data that the field needs to build things, that the client needs to be able to assess things, that the code official needs to do to know that you're not building a death trap. How we communicate that doesn't, and once you start to get people the idea that like, it doesn't matter if these things are in this order in the schedule, or if we call this X or Y, it's still a direction. Like, offer people ways to see that you're doing the same task, you're getting the same endpoint, just via a different route. Like, BIM is tough with that because it is a whole different thing. Like, CAD was still the same as drawing. Like, it was the same workflow. BIM is a whole different set of data. It is not, the lines on the paper or PDFs are an after effect. They're a legacy communication tool. And recognizing that we're still doing the same communication is key, and finding ways to speak to folks who are reticent about change that makes it easy for them to see the continuities, easy for them to see that you're doing the same task is really, really helpful. But there's also a level of change is hard and change is scary, and folks don't want to change.
And if I could just add to that, part of that kind of getting that buy-in is partially not giving up, but it's also kind of showing the use case, kind of showing the proof of concept. So we have a couple of teams using AR, VR as an example. Kind of reached out to a couple of project leaders and said, oh, we're rolling out this technology, the kind of the Vive headsets, on a number of projects. Would you like to share them? No, I don't feel comfortable with that kind of thing. So, okay. But then we reached out to one of the tech leaders on that project and said, oh, would you like a headset to try a few things out? They took it on board, they tried it, they loved it, they kind of set that project up in it, and then they showed their project leaders, look at how we can like collaborate, and they were like, yeah, this is perfect, and then that team leader requested headsets for the whole team.
Exposure is huge. Giving folks the chance to see things. One of our internal training things is Third Thursday Tech 10. I do a 10-minute technical blurb on something that we use in technology related in the office. It may be something about one particular Bluebeam feature, it may be something about what AR is, it may be something about cybersecurity, but it's a technical thing that is just to give folks exposure. It's intentionally a short structure, a short thing, just enough to expose people to the idea, so that when they see it in a client meeting, they're like, oh yeah, I know what a BIM execution plan is. I know what a point cloud is, or at least I've heard of it. And I know that I can go talk to Michael. I know that I can go talk to somebody else who presented on that. And just having that little bit of exposure, just letting them see that, and then repeating that. Mention it in a project meeting that, hey, this isn't right for this project, but it's helpful for other things. Giving people the little pings, the little reminders, the trickle of exposure can be huge.
I just want to add one thing from my personal experience. We always think that it's going to be too difficult to take old dogs to learn new tricks. But in reality, it's not always the case. And you will be surprised how easy it is when people actually tested it and has the opportunity to engage with it. They became defenders of it. And we observe that a lot of times, even with BIM and Revit, simple things. People that have jumped around and said, I will never use it, and then, after a couple of months of using it, when they pass that threshold of the pain for the pleasure, they will become the first of saying, I will do anything, but don't put me again doing CAD.
That's a challenge. Like, from CAD to Revit was a challenge. Like, you're asking them to get into metaverse, right, which is again like kind of a different universe they are trying to move into, right? It's not easy for people to move into that kind of an environment. That's a challenge. So we are over time. Like, can we spend 5 more minutes, or we want to take a break now? It's 5 more minutes? Okay, we have got 3 questions. We have 1 minute each for each questions online. What is the typical size of a team that makes these learning techniques worthwhile?
So I think that's we've
same kind of a question.
Yeah, we've covered it, but it's I think the other aspect as well is that kind of anything you do live, pre-record it as well. It's kind of reusing it for multiple people. It's, like I say, if the office is 5 people, engage those 5 people, find the topic. If it's 100 people, yeah, find what's relevant.
Any team size works.
Yeah.
Okay. Fred, the question for you. Are there similar initiatives to the European Green Deal in Singapore or in Asia?
Are there?
European Green Deal.
Oh, yes, there are. So we do have in Singapore also initiatives, and we have the 2030 program, national-wide program. We have Green Mark that is basically in Singapore. So I guess that anywhere that you go in the world, you end up seeing a lot of initiatives related with either the 2030 or the 2050. Mm-hmm. And if anything, the challenge is that although we are talking about the same, each country is kind of taking different approach. So for someone operating like us regionally, it forces to actually take an approach of being able to engage with diversity, that at the end of the day, when you actually overcome that challenge, it becomes a value added because it opens up your mind and it enables you to source for each one of them to become with better outcomes in terms of your work that you do.
Thank you. Last question, Martin, do you have some kind of sustainability and environmental education at KPF?
Sustained what involvement, sorry?
Do you have some kind of sustainability and environmental education?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of initiatives on that side. So some of it falls into our general software learning. So a lot of our sustainability and environmental performance analysis is grasshopper driven. So we show people how to use that, how to apply that. We also have what we call our GROW group internally. We've got quite a few sort of like special interest groups that kind of help promote certain topics. But yeah, they hold monthly events to kind of promote different topics. But yeah, like I say, as far as we can, sustainability is integrated into our design process. So here's the considerations when using Revit, when using Rhino, Grasshopper. It's not a separate topic most of the time.
Sounds good. 30 seconds to what exactly your firms are doing on BIM for next 5 years. What technology trends is your firm adopting, like all 3 of you? 30 seconds.
Super quick. It's like I say, for us, it's about integrating it into the wider process. So we're quite a Rhino design-heavy firm. We don't want BIM to be a separate topic that certain people do. So for us, and with sustainability, it's that kind of holistic workflow that kind of pushes it. It's kind of bringing AR, VR into using it with BIM. It's no longer seeing BIM as its own thing. We're beyond that now.
We're looking at a lot of cleanup and re-examination of our existing practices to try to find ways to eliminate potential errors and omissions, eliminate manual work that could be automated to free folks up to actually be able to do more creative work as opposed to doing the same mundane work over and over again. So more automation, quality control, that's a deep dive, that's a long process that is always ongoing. Like for everyone it should be, we can always do better, but that our next big push is into cleaning up the closets, I guess you could say.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we tend to look a little bit beyond just BIM, right? And with the idea of integrated digital delivery that is very pushed in Singapore. And one of the things that we have been working hard with some collaboration with Autodesk and also the ROFOs is this idea of the constellation of common data environments. So how do you actually, understanding the value of data, we don't want to always to be working in an environment that is hosted by someone else, but we still want to achieve that flexibility. And for that, we need to achieve something of an integration of different systems that automatically synchronize with each other. So that's probably the largest challenge that we'll get, is ensure ownership of our own data, but still collaborate on the common data environment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I welcome you back at 11:30 for the next session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.